Every morning, like clockwork, the boy arrived at Ridgeview High School with a suitcase. It wasn't flashy or new. In fact, it looked like something forgotten in a war zone. Faded black fabric, frayed handle, rusty zipper. Yet he carried it with the reverence of someone holding the last piece of their soul. He never opened it, never left it unattended. Even during PE, it sat by the bleachers like a silent guardian. Most students called him Suitcase Boy. His real name was Eli, 17, thin, silent, guarded. Not the kind of student who stirred attention with rebellion or brilliance. He barely spoke, sat at the back of the class, never raised his hand, never smiled. But there was something about his eyes. They weren't empty. They were watching, always alert, like a boy waiting for something bad to happen again. Why does he always bring that thing? Sasha whispered it to a friend Mary during a slow history class. Maybe it's homeless or something, Mary replied, half joking, half uneasy. Come on, this isn't a movie. But it felt like one, especially on cold days when Eli's fingers shook on his pencil, or when he didn't eat lunch, or when someone laughed too loudly and his whole body flinched like he'd been hit. Behind the walls of room 2B, life continued. Essays, pub quizzes, hallway gossip, after school clubs. But Eli never stayed late. He was always the first to leave once the bell rang. Shoulders hunched, suitcase rolling behind him, wheels squeaking like a broken whisper. None of them knew what happened when he left. None of them knew that the suitcase wasn't luggage, it was his home. He slept wherever he could, park benches, bus stops, the boiler room of an old apartment block that had long since been condemned. On lucky nights, a kind security guard let him stay in a supply room and pretended to be invisible. Inside that suitcase, a threadbare blanket, one extra shirt, a broken toothbrush, 2 granola bars, and a photograph, 2 infants in a hospital bassinet, side by side, one sleeping, one staring at the camera with eyes too big for his face. His twin, the one who died the day Eli was born. The reason his parents called him cursed. The reason they abandoned him like trash. The reason he never learned to call anyone mom or dad. But no one at Ridgeview knew that. And Eli worked hard to make sure they never would. Each morning, he scrubbed his face in gas station bathrooms, brushed his teeth with bottled water, and ironed his uniform using a hot metal lid pressed over a towel. He sat in class, exhausted but focused. He had to focus. This place, this building, these teachers. This was his only chance to escape the shadows. He couldn't afford to be noticed until someone did. Her name was Ms. Ravens. She taught literature, mid-30s, kind eyes, no nonsense mouth, a master of silence and empathy. She saw things others missed, the way Eli's hands trembled when writing, the way he sometimes nodded off in class, only to jerk himself awake in shame, the way he stayed perfectly still, like movement would make him crumble. And the suitcase. She noticed how he never let it out of his sight, not for fire trees, not for restroom breaks, not even when he once sprained his ankle in gym and leaped to class with blood soaking through his sock. She never asked about it. Not yet. But she began to watch. Not like the others out of curiosity or judgment, but with quiet concern, with intention. One Thursday afternoon, the rain wouldn't stop falling. Thunder echoed through the hallways like distant grief. The last bell had rung. The classrooms emptied. But Ms. Ravens lingered. Something in her gut told her to wait. She stepped into the hallway and caught a glimpse through the glass panel of the stairwell door. Eli, sitting at the bottom step, hunched, soaked, eyes closed, suitcase clutched in both hands like it was about to float away. She opened the door quietly. The light above flickered. Eli, she said softly. His head snapped up, eyes wide with fear for a second, like a stray animal caught in headlights. Then, nothing. His face hardened, guard up, lips sealed. I was just on my way out, he muttered. She didn't move. Would you like to borrow a dry towel? Or wait till the rain slows? He stood, shook his head. I'm fine. He turned, walked away, and the suitcase rode behind him, whispering his lonely song down the hallway. That night, Miss Ravens sat at her desk, staring at the empty attendance list, and wrote just 3 words in the corner of her journal. He's hiding something. But it wasn't a mystery she wanted to solve. It was a boy she wanted to save. Rain poured steadily the next morning as Ridgeville's High buzzed with the dull rhythm of school life. Announcements echoing from the speakers, wet sneakers squeaking against polished floors, and students shaking water from their backpacks. Most of them were half asleep or scrolling through their phones. But Eli was already in his seat, second row from the back. Same spot, same silent presence, same suitcase at his feet, standing upright like a soldier. His clothes were damp despite the roof over his head. His face looked paler than usual, and the dark rings under his eyes seemed darker still. Miss Ravens watched him from the front of the class as she handed out a pop quiz on of mice and men. While students groaned and shuffled papers, Eli stared at the sheet like it was a message from another world, one he once knew but no longer lived in. She walked by his desk slowly, pretending to check on others until she stopped beside him. Take your time, she said quietly. He didn't look up, just nodded once, barely. The cafeteria was chaos. Laughter, shouting, the smell of warm food, a jungle of cliques and trays and gossip. But Eli wasn't there. He never was. Miss Ravens waited 10 minutes, then stepped into the hallway, clutching a thermos of cocoa and a wrapped turkey sandwich from the teacher's lounge. She walked toward the back stairway, the same place she'd seen him the day before. And there he was, sitting alone on the floor, his suitcase beside him like always, knees drawn to his chest. He didn't react as she approached. She sat down across from him without asking. "I figured you might be cold," she said, placing the sandwich and thermos between them like peace offerings. "It's not much, but I'm not hungry," he mumbled. "Maybe not now, but maybe later." Silence settled between them like fog. The hallway was quiet here, far from the eyes of students, far from judgment. "I used to eat lunch in stairwells too," Miss Ravent said after a moment. "When I was in high school, I didn't like being around people." He glanced at her just briefly. She smiled softly. "And I didn't have a suitcase." That made his eyes drop again. His arms tightened around his knees. "I don't want trouble," he whispered. "I just want to be left alone." "I know," she replied. "But sometimes being alone can hurt more than help." He didn't answer, but he didn't leave either. After school, she watched him from a window. Eli waited by the edge of the building, near the faculty parking lot, until the last few bus seats pulled away. Then he walked off, disappearing into the rain once again. No umbrella, just the suitcase and his silent footsteps. That night, Miss Raven sat at a kitchen table, laptop open, a cup of tea steaming beside her. She had pulled up the school's emergency curtain records. There was no home address listed for Eli, just a single phone number, disconnected. No guardian name, no emergency contact, no medical form submitted. Only a fine note from a year ago, enrolled under special circumstances. Documentation provided by a local archery center. Name of guardian? Temporary placement. Temporary, like a borrowed pencil. The next day, she approached the school counselor, Mr. True, a kind, soft-spoken man who believed in second chances, but rarely questioned the system. "Have you ever spoken to Eli?" "Eli," he repeated, flipping through folders. "Suitcase boy?" She frowned. "Let's not call him that." "Right, sorry." "No, not really. He's quiet, keeps to himself, no reported behavioral issues, excellent grades. Actually, do we know where he's staying?" "I think one of the shelters downtown, maybe. Honestly, I don't think we ever got a full record, just a fast-track enrollment." Her heart sank. "He's 17, she said, "and he's surviving, but I don't think he's living." That Friday, she made a decision. As the final bell rang and the students flooded the hallways with noise and backpacks, Miss Raven stood by her door, pretending to tidy up. Eli passed by her classroom, alone as always. "Eli," she called her gently. He froze. She stepped into the hall, lowering her voice. "Would you stay a few minutes after school today? There's a writing competition I think you might be interested in." He hesitated. "I don't write," he said. "You do," she replied. "You just don't let anyone read it." He didn't answer. "I'll be here until 5, she said, stepping back inside. Eli stood there for a second longer. Then he nodded. slightly and walked away. But at 4:52 p.m., just as she was preparing to leave, a soft knock came at her door. It creaked open. Eli stood there, his suitcase beside him, soaked again from the rain, hair matted, eyes unreadable. "I don't want the competition," he said quietly. "I know," she replied. "I don't know why I came." "I do." He stepped in, the door closing behind him with a gentle click. Miss Ravens motioned toward a seat across from her desk. He sat down, and for the first time he placed the suitcase beside the chair, not clutched in his lap, not between him and the world, just beside him, like he was letting it breathe. She didn't speak, neither did he, not yet, but something had shifted. The walls were whispering now, and his story was about to begin. The classroom was too quiet for a Friday evening. All the other students were long gone. The janitor's distant mop switches echoed faintly down the hallway, and the sky outside the window had turned the color of storm bruises. Eli sat across from Mrs. Ravens, soaked and silent, a suitcase beside him like a dog unsure if it's safe to rest. Miss Ravens didn't push. She knew the difference between silence that needed feeling and silence that needed respect. Instead, she poured him a warm cup of cocoa from her thermos and slid it across the desk, looked at her, then slowly took it in both hands. Hands that trembled slightly, not from fear, but from exhaustion. "I'm not trying to fix you," she said gently, "and I'm not trying to drag anything out of you." He didn't look up. "I just want you to know, I see you, Eli. Not a suitcase, not a silence. You." His jaw tightened. He said nothing, but the cocoa didn't leave his hands. A full minute passed, then two, and finally, with her meeting her gaze, Eli spoke. "I was born with a brother." His voice was flat, low, like someone recalling a sad past. "A twin." Miss Ravens didn't move. Her breath slowed. "They said he died before he even left the hospital." A pause. "My parents, they blamed me. Said I was bad luck. A sign that something evil had come through." Her stomach twisted, but she said nothing. "They left me at a train station, just like that. I was 2 weeks old." He sipped the cocoa. His hands steadied a bit. "Someone found me and took me to a shelter. I bounced between people until I was 6. That's when I met her, Auntie Lau. She wasn't really my aunt. She just saw me one day and didn't walk past. She had this little apartment that always smelled like ginger and onions and meat. She taught me how to read using cereal boxes and church bulletins. I thought she'd be forever." Another pause. "She died in a car crash on a rainy Wednesday." His voice cracked just for a second. "No one claimed me. I just disappeared again. It was like the world kept erasing me." Miss Ravens blinked back at the burn in her eyes. "I'm so sorry, Eli." He nodded stiffly, but the words seemed to fall past him like rain on glass. "After that, I ended up with this mechanic. Said I could stay if I worked, but it wasn't work, it was slavery. Oil burns, broken fingers, no school, no bed, no voice." He essayed slowly. "One night, a fire broke out. I didn't cause it, I swear. But I ran. I was 12. I've been running ever since." The cocoa was almost gone now. The silence that followed was heavier than any words, and yet it wasn't empty. It was full of lots of wounds, of memories shoved in the corners too small to hold them. I found this suitcase behind a train station dumpster. I finally said, nodding toward it. It was empty, but I filled it with whatever I could. A blanket, a photo of me and my brother. My whole life is in there. His eyes flicked to her. If I lose it, I lose everything I ever had. Miss Ravens leaned forward. You're not going to lose anything. Not anymore. She stood, walked to a nearby cabinet, and put out a small towel and a seed sandwich from the stash she always kept. Here, you're not living like this tonight. He hesitated. You're not going to call anyone, are you? Like child services or a shelter? I'm not calling anyone yet, she said carefully. I'm offering you what you've never had, a choice. If you need a place to stay tonight, my guest room is warm and dry. No strings, just safety. He looked at her, searching for the catch. What if I say no? Then I'll give you a ride to wherever you plan to go. But I won't stop checking on you. Not anymore. Another long silence. Then slowly he nodded. Later that night, for the first time in years, Eli slept in a real bed. The suitcase rested against the wall, unopened, but for the first time it wasn't beside him on the floor. It didn't need to be, because for the first time he felt safe enough to let go of it, even if just for the night. In the darkness, as he drifted off under clean sheets, a tear slipped down his cheek. Not from pain, not from fear, but from relief. He whispered something no one heard. Thank you. And down the hall, Miss Raven sat awake. The door cracked open, listening, protecting. The boy with a suitcase had finally opened something far more important than a lock. He had opened the first door to healing. The morning light filtered softly through the cream-colored curtains of the guest room. For a moment, just a moment, Eli didn't move. He lay still, eyes half opened, confused by the unfamiliar feeling. Warmth, stillness, silence that didn't threaten him. No shouts, no footsteps, no cold concrete beneath him. He turned his head slowly. The suitcase sat by the wall, untouched, unopened, still upright as if watching him. For the first time in years, he'd slept through the night. Down the hall, Miss Ravens was in the kitchen, humming softly as she stirred eggs in a pan. The sound of gentle music played on a low-volume speaker. She looked up as he stepped in, barefoot and unsure, his eyes scanning the room like a stranger afraid to touch the furniture. I hope you're hungry, she said with a smile that was real, not pitying. I didn't know if you were allergic to anything, so I kept it simple. He didn't sit right away. His body hovered behind the kitchen chair like he was trespassing. You don't have to do all this, he murmured. She set a plate on the table. I know, but I want to. Stillness. Then slowly he sat. Over breakfast, there were no questions, just quiet conversations. Miss Ravens talked about her love for old books, how her cat Juniper once dragged a dead bird into her bedroom, and how she secretly hated group chats. Eli listened, his face unreadable, but something in his shoulders had shifted. Less stiff, less curled inward. He only spoke once. This is the first time I've had a real breakfast since. I don't know, maybe ever. She didn't cry in front of him. She just refilled its cup. That day at school, something changed. Not outwardly. Eli still walked alone, still carried a suitcase. But there was a slight difference in how he carried it. Not like a shield, more like a symbol, more like a shadow he'd finally acknowledged. In class, he raised his hand for the first time. Just once. A short answer. Quiet voice. But it was enough for the entire room to turn in surprise. Sasha blinked. Mary dropped her pen. Even Mr. Drew, passing in the hallway, did a double take. Eli didn't care. He didn't flinch. He looked right at Miss Ravens and said, "Metaphor. It's a metaphor for how loneliness can be louder than noise." She didn't smile. She beamed. But the world does not pause just because healing begins. Later that week, after school, Eli returned to his usual spot in the library while waiting for Miss Ravens to finish her staff meeting. As he pulled out its notebook, he didn't notice the two boys approaching from behind. Darren and Joel, sophomores, loud, reckless, noisy. "Hey, suitcase boy," Darren whispered monkily, leaning over the table. "You writing about your secret homeless adventures?" Joel laughed. "But that suitcase got treasure maps and canned beans in it." Eli said nothing. He didn't lift his head. "Come on, man," Darren said, grabbing for the handle. "Let's see what's inside. Be a dead rat or..." Eli shut up fast. The chest creaked. His eyes were wide, breath uneven. He yanked the suitcase to his chest with such ferocity that both boys stepped back. "Don't touch it," he said, voice shaking. "Don't." The librarian rushed over. "What's going on here?" Darren raised his hands. "We were just kidding. Relax. It's not like it's gonna bite us." But Eli was already out the door, suitcase dragging behind him, heart pounding like fists on the door. That night, he didn't go to Miss Raven's house. He disappeared. She waited, called, texted the number she'd given him on a sticky note. No reply. She searched the school grounds the next morning, the park, the side alley, where she'd once seen him drying his shoes on a heating vent. Nothing. For 2 full days, Eli was gone. Then on the 3rd day, just before first bell, she found him on the school roof, sitting cross-legged, suitcase beside him, staring out at the skyline like he was trying to decide if it was still worth fighting for. She didn't speak. She simply sat beside him. After a while, he said, "They try to open it. I know. They don't understand. If they open it, everything I've heard together, it will fall apart." She nodded slowly. "You've built your whole world in there. I had to. You don't anymore." He looked at her. "I'm still scared," he admitted. "That's no weakness, Eli. That's honesty. And it's the first step." They sat in silence for a while. The morning sun warmed their backs. Then Eli did something unthinkable. He reached down and zipped the suitcase. He didn't open it wide, just enough for her to see a corner of a blanket, a one photo, a notebook covered in cracked duct tape, a small folded up drawing of a house with a tree and 2 stick figures holding hands. Then he zipped it closed again. He didn't have to say a word. She understood. The suitcase was no longer a fortress. It was a memory, and Eli was finally learning to step outside of it. The days that followed felt lighter, like someone had quietly lifted a brick from Eli's chest. He still carried the suitcase, but not like before. It no longer clung to him like a second spine. Now it rolled at his side, still important, still present, but not everything. Miss Ravens noticed the difference first. He smiled once, just a flicker, during class when she joked about Shakespeare being the original Emo. He asked a question during group discussion, and after school one afternoon he sat in her classroom long after the final bell, not because he needed to, but because he wanted to. It was the beginning of something new, something fragile, but not everyone welcomes change. That Thursday morning, as the wind howled through Ridgeville's rusted flagpole, Eli walked through the front gates with his usual careful posture. But something was wrong. The moment he entered the hallway, silence followed him, not the usual kind. This was colder, sharper. Whispers buzzed at the edges of conversations. People glanced and quickly looked away. It wasn't until he reached his locker that he saw it. A sheet of paper taped to the mental door. A printed photo, low resolution, but unmistakable. A snapshot of him asleep on a bench, suitcase clutched to his chest, blanket pulled over his knees like a cocoon. It had to be weeks ago, taken from a distance, hidden, secret. Across the top, someone had scrawled in red marker, Ridgeville's runaway, who sleeps in parks and still eats his mouth. His hands trembled as he tore the page down. He turned, laughter somewhere behind him. Footsteps rushing away, phones being slipped into backpacks. He stood frozen, exposed. By third period, the whole school had seen it. No one said anything to its face, but the damage had already been done. The whispers returned, the glances, the mockery behind cupped hands. And worst of all, the fear in Eli's chest began to return. That old, familiar fear. They know. Miss Raven stormed into the main office when she found out. She demanded an investigation, demanded that phones be checked, that hallway cameras be reviewed. But the truth was simple. Someone had taken the photo weeks ago and now they'd use it to humiliate him. And Eli? He was slipping back into the cracks he'd only just begun to climb out of. That afternoon, he didn't show up for class or for their after-school reading session. Miss Ravens checked the stairwell, the roof, even the library. Nothing. Only the janitor had seen him leaving through the side door before lunch. Looked like he was holding something heavy on his shoulders. The man said, like the wind alone could knock him over. That night, Miss Ravens drove through half the city. She checked every place she thought he might hide. A shelter near 5th Street. A 24-hour dinner where she once bought him tea. The bus station, nothing. Until finally near midnight, she turned into the parking lot of an abandoned rec center near the industrial district. Her headlights swept across a wall of shattered windows and graffiti. And there, in the shadows near the loading dock, she saw it. A black suitcase, propped upright against the wall. Eli sat beside it, arms wrapped around his knees, head down, rain dripping from the brim of his hoodie. She pulled the car over, got out slowly, no umbrella, no flashlight, just her. She approached him, and he didn't move. When she knelt beside him, she saw his eyes, red, swollen, empty. They laughed. he whispered. I know. They saw everything. That's who I am to them now. No, Eli, she said firmly. That's what they try to make you. That's not who you are. He didn't believe her. Not yet. She placed her hand gently on the suitcase. I can't take this pain away. I wish I could, but I can give you one thing, truth. He looked up. You've survived more than any student I've ever taught, more than most adults ever will. And now they know. Let them see the weight you've carried, because what they are seeing isn't shame, it's strength. He stared at her. I don't want to be the suitcase boy forever. Show them all, not by hiding, but by walking through them with your head held high. Eli didn't say anything, but that night as she drove him back to her heart, he kept glancing at her, something new in his eyes. Not fear, not shame, something else, a choice forming. The next morning, Eli walked into Redfield's front hall just as the bell rang. He was clean, calm, focused. He rolled his suitcase behind him, slowly, deliberately, through the crowd of whisperers. Then he stopped in front of the main bulletin board. He put something from his backpack, a sheet of paper, thick, typed in bold. He pinned it right in the center of the board, then walked away without saying a word. Curious student stepped forward and read. That photo was real. Yes, I've slept on benches. Yes, I carry my life in a suitcase. Yes, I've been homeless, abandoned, forgotten. But I'm still here, still learning, still passing every test because I'm not weak. I'm a survivor. If that makes me the suitcase boy, then I'll wear it like armor. But know this, every step I take is mine, and I'm not going anywhere. Eli N. The hallway fell quiet, and somewhere down the hall, a teacher wiped a tear and whispered, he just wrote his first masterpiece. The hallway had never been so silent. Students who'd once whispered behind Eli's back now stood in front of the bulletin board, reading his note in stone quiet. Even the loudest voices, the ones who fed off drama, who joked about his suitcase, who had shared the photo, stood still, uncertain. Eli didn't stay to watch. He walked straight to room 2B, his suitcase rolling behind him, face calm, not blank, calm. Because for the first time in his life, Eli had told his whole story, not through rumors, not through silence, but on his own terms. He took his seat. Miss Ravens gave him a small nod, the kind of nod that said everything and asked for nothing. And Eli nodded back. Later that day, something happened that caught him completely off guard. It started with a knock on the classroom door during lunch. A girl, Mary, the same one who once laughed at his silence, stepped in, holding a small paper bag. I didn't know, she said awkwardly. I'm sorry for how I treated you. For the jokes, it wasn't right. She set the bag on his desk, peanut butter and jelly, and a juice box in case you didn't eat today. Before he could respond, she was already walking away. He stared at the bag, stunned. It wasn't charity, it wasn't pity, it was human. The shift was slow but real. Over the next week, small gestures began to appear. A student in his math class asked to sit beside him. A junior from the soccer team offered him an old hoodie during a cold morning. Someone anonymously slipped a new notebook into his locker. No notes, just a simple, clean journal with gold trim and a single word on the cover. Begin. But not everything changed. Not everyone was kind. Some stayed snickered when he passed. Some muttered publicity stunt under their breath. One student even asked loudly in class, "Are we supposed to feel bad because he was poor?" Eli looked up slowly. His voice was quiet but steady. "No, you don't have to feel anything." Then he turned back to his notes. One afternoon, a social worker showed up at the school. Apparently, someone had reported Eli's living situation, not to punish, but to help. They offered him a place in a state-run group's home, a bunk bed, roads, curfews, a path toward normalcy. Eli sat in the office with Miss Ravens, listening to the offer. Then he shook his head. "Already have a home," he said. The woman looked confused. "Where?" He turned to Miss Ravens. "With her." She took full guardianship the next week. It wasn't easy. Paperwork, background checks, long interviews. But she fought for him. And Eli, who once had nothing but a suitcase, was finally given a legal identity, a home address, a real bed, and most importantly, a sense of belonging. As spring bloomed across the school courtyard, Eli's name was suddenly everywhere but not as gossip. On the honor board for ranking top 5 in the junior class, on the creative writing wall for his piece titled "What I Carried," on the debate club flyer listed as their newest member, and finally on the principal's list marked eligible for full scholarship consideration. One evening after dinner, Eli stood in his new bedroom, suitcase in hand. He set it gently on the bed, unzipped it. One by one, he began to remove the content: the photo of his twin, the crumpled drawing of Auntie Lau's kitchen, the journal, the blanket, the dented fork he'd once used to pry open cans, the list he had once scribbled: "Don't get caught, don't be seen, don't trust." He stared at the list for a long time, then slowly he tore it in half. Then again, until it was just pieces of something no longer needed. He placed the suitcase in his closet, closed it, walked away. In that moment, Eli understood something. The suitcase was never the weight. He was the strength. And now, he didn't need to carry his past. He could build his future. 1 year later, he stood on a graduation stage wearing a deep blue robe and a silver tassel. Valedictorian. He approached the podium, hands steady, voice clear. "My name is Eli. Some of you once called me Suitcase Boy. I used to think that was a scar, but now I know it was proof that I survived what many couldn't. I don't carry the suitcase anymore, not because I'm ashamed of it, but because I no longer have to." He looked out over the crowd. "I don't want to be remembered for what I carried. I want to be remembered for how I kept walking." And they remembered, not as a boy with a suitcase, but as a boy who turned it into a story, and then into a legacy.